Good evening, everybody. Tonight is a test of the Mevo system again, and what I've been trying to do at the moment, it's a bit early days, but at the moment I'm trying to find the sweet spot distance for doing interviews and explanations at the bench and so on and so forth. So that's principally the reason why I'm recording this video. But obviously it's going to be pretty boring if I just sit here and say 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So the plan is tonight to just do a quick video of how I mix my own dyes to enable me to color match repairs to tools and various other things that come along. For instance, recently I've had the commode, the 18th century commode, Georgian commode, that is currently under restoration, and I did some restoration on the inlay banding, and that will be obviously brand new. The ebony is not going to make a difference, but the boxwood is very white still. So I plan to, at some point in the next week, finish that restoration and do some more inlay work and colour match that as well. But I thought it would be an opportune moment to explain the method that I have used for where I've repaired things like the horn on a saw or a plane where it's snapped off, knocked off the bench, boom, oh dear. And it's been grafted with some new wood, usually mahogany. It's going to look brand new. So the idea is to try to colour match that to the patina of that period. So there's a number of techniques that I use, but what I don't use is out of a bottle dyes, the standard spirit dyes or water-based dyes that you get from a local hardware shop, because they tend to be matched for furniture and things like that. So they're not ideal. And I try to start from scratch. And what I do is just to show you, I have a selection of powdered aniline dyes. Now these are very concentrated powders, and particularly the light red and yellow. These are the coloured, really high tinted colours. So I use four of these, and they are basically start with dark brown. Now the dark brown is the base colour, so that's what you're starting with, except obviously if you're doing a light wood, then you wouldn't necessarily start with that, but that's basically what I use for most of the tools, because they're patinated so dark now that they tend to start off with a base of dark brown. To the dark brown, I sometimes lighten it up with a light brown, and that's just with certain woods, the beech, for instance, that has no inherent coloration underneath. And so those two colours alone would be fine. If it was originally mahogany contains some yellow and some red in different proportions, and it depends on the age. And other woods as well will have one or other of those two added primary colours. But with those four powders, we can create most of the colour matching that you need for matching that period. So what we do is we take the colours, and I mix them, the primary colours, with denatured alcohol, which in the UK is coloured purple. Now that doesn't actually, it's very difficult to do, that doesn't actually inherently color the final dye, because it's very, very fugitive. Once it's started to be mixed, the color disappears. In fact, I have 2 bottles, and just get those 2 bottles here. This is the basic one that you get from the shop. Now they're coloured like that too because it's methanol. Well, it's basically denatured alcohol. It's methanol, a lot of methanol in it, and it's quite poisonous, inherently poisonous. So stop alcoholics drinking it. Basically, that's what happens to it after 6 months of sitting in the sunshine. It's very, very fugitive, the dye. So it doesn't really affect the colour of the dye itself. So if we start with the brown itself here, and we look at the colour, just get a. This is my main mix here. If we mix this, just did this now, and it's freezing at the moment in here because the heating hasn't had a chance to heat up. But it is quite a subtle colour to start with, and you can see that this is a very, very subtle colour. But dyes work on the basis that the more layers you put on, the more the colour will transfer and the deeper it will get. So that's your primary brown. Now, if I take that and then look at it and say, is it slightly redder or slightly more, just slightly redder, I can add the light brown, because this tends to be a reddish tint to it anyway. So we can add that as another layer, or we can mix it with the primary brown. So that gives it a redder tint, but not very bright red. So we're starting now to build up the colours. As you can see, there is a slight amount of yellow in it. I think I've got some yellow transferred, but you get the idea. Now, if you then if you then want it much redder, you only need a very tiny amount of this, and I always mix this with the primary colour using a dropper. So you have to estimate. Don't overdo it, because it really is quite effective, and that will give us a red tint that's inherently in the background with mahogany. But each time you're doing it, it's very, very subtle. It's a very subtle colouring of the wood, and you can see it's now starting to show yellows and reds in there. And it gets darker and darker. Now, if you just leave that to dry, and then wait, once it's dried, put another coat on it, that will darken the overall effect of the new wood. Pine isn't a great wood to practice on. It's a piece of the mahogany that I used the other day. It starts out basically roughly the right colour you need. But what we're trying to do effectively is to darken it and bring it in line with the wood that it's trying to match. And now this has got some red in it. The technique that I use is taking the new wood, and I once I've got the wood that I've actually used for the repair, I get another piece of it as a scrap piece of it, and I make a swatch, which is basically a sample of various colours mixed together, to see whether or not which one matches the original wood the best. And you keep doing that until you've come to the conclusion that on the sample it's correct. So that you're not touching the repair yet. It hasn't. It's the last thing you do. Once you've got the colour that you want, you've now got mixed in your master bottle here the colour that you want. And I usually, if this were the final result, or let's take a piece of mahogany for instance. If this is the final result that we're happy with, that it actually does match what you've repaired, then I cut a piece of this off and just tape it to one of these eyedropper type bottles, and put a label on it and with a date, and then I know that if I've got a selection of pre-mixed aniline dyes in spirit that I can use for future projects, because they do tend to patinate similar colours. There are some that might have existed in the 18th century in tallow light. There might have been later, slightly later, with gaslight. So they are different, completely different colours, but they're of the same tone. They might have a few more blacks in, and so on and so forth. And the trick that I've shown before is to use earth colours, and literally use earth colours, which is mud from the garden, and rub that in, because it does copy the look of old tallow. And also what it does is it leaves behind a layer of dirt that dries and then forms the grime as if it was aged grime. So you can quite well match the damaged area on a tool. I think I have here an example of this saw. Now, this particular saw was found at a boot fair, and it had a horn that had completely broken off, and it is now being repaired. Don't know if you can quite see the repair on it. I'll hold it in the light. You might not be able to see it, but it is actually, if I can hold it this way, it is actually completely diagonally across there. There was no horn on this at all. So this has been colour matched to the patination of this Robert Sorby tenon saw, almost exactly. And over the years, because it's coated afterwards with a fine layer, either true oil or shellac, over the years of the next couple of years, waxing it with Alfie Shine, or touching it and playing with it, sawing with it, etc., is going to blend it in even more, and to the point where it's quite difficult to actually see. I don't know if I can hold it up close enough. It's quite difficult to actually see where the damage is. You can just see it in the light there. I turn it. But it's restored it back to something that looks like it wasn't damaged. It's a little bit shortened. It was difficult to put it all back. I just managed to get as much of it back as possible. You can actually see, I think you can see the join underneath in that area. If I can tilt the light, you can just see the join there where it goes diagonally. It's quite a lot of the original horn missing. So that's the type of repair that you can match by using aniline dyes such as these. You can come up with exactly the right color, and you can start by using the basics, the brown, and adding the tints. So this is the earth color. The tints are then added. This is quite cold, and therefore it's got a lot of particles in it at the moment. It's not quite mixed in, but once it gets warm, if I hold it in my hand, it will mix really well. And that acts as a good dye for your repair. So that's it. It's as simple as that. The aniline dyes, I think in the UK, they come from J. Hewitt and Sons, and these are leather dyes. They're actually for staining leather, for doing shoes and belts and things like that. But they are just aniline powder dyes, and that's all they are. In the USA, you've got the benefit of having trans tint, which I believe is an aniline dye already mixed into a liquid form, and I think you can get it in powder form as well. I know I've seen the results from that, and they are quite impressive. And they also have, as do Hewitts, they have a wide range of colours, but most of the other colours like blue, green, and so on are not colours that you would find in an old antique tool. So it is only those 4 colours. Repeat those. Dark brown for the base earth colour. Light brown if it's a lighter brown, or to mix to get a combination. And then adjust those colours with a tint. Could be just red, it could be just yellow, or it could be a combination of the two. But at some point you will come to a decision that the colour that you get is the correct tint. And when you've got the swatch, you then apply your final dye to the repair and just keep doing it layer by layer until you build up the colour density that you want for the repair. And then it's just a case of aging that, because it will never, even if it's the same tone, it will never look exactly the same until you age it. And you just, as I say, using things like techniques like earth and then once you're done, just cover it with a coat of shellac or Troil. And that's it. So I'm off to see how this has come out. Obviously, it's now getting on for 11 o'clock at night, and Alfie's well asleep by now. He likes his beauty sleep, so he's asleep on the couch. But I just wanted to see how this distance, which isn't quite as close as we had before, but it's closer than I had on the first video, which was quite a long way away. So it gives me the ability to be able to see exactly how far away from the subject matter I need to be. I think this would probably be an ideal distance to have an interview with somebody sitting on a chair next to me. So when it all moves up into to become the media centre, the plan is that we will have two chairs or a couch, I'm not sure. Inevitably, it's going to be a Chesterfield leather chair. Actually, I saw one today. It was fantastic. It was in Superdry shop, clothing shop in Blue Water shopping centre, and it was brown Chesterfield double-seater sofa, quite a wide one, and it was beautiful. It was worn. It wasn't ripped, but it was worn, and it was patchy, in the surface. Lost a lot of colour, some bright areas, some dark areas. Great, it was beautiful. So that's the plan, having something like that. So, but at the moment, I'm having to use this as a workshop. So you can't do both. I cannot fit a sofa in here. That would be ridiculous. You'd be moving it all the time. So at the moment, I'm using the sawhorse that I made to actually sit on to talk tonight. And actually, it's at the perfect height. So yet again, another use for Tom Pigeon's fantastic sawhorse. It's a wonderful seat, and I can do a lot of delicate work from here, particularly with the state of my legs at the moment. Anyway, I'm off to get a cup of coffee and put this video up and see exactly what it comes out like. Hopefully, it'll be pretty good. We'll see you then. See you at the next one. Another test, I think, for the next one. Take care.